Alright, peace and greetings YouTubers. So I wanted to take some time to talk about the recent release Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Now this film is available on Netflix. I think it's also available in movie theaters, but I saw it on Netflix. And so this is the film adaptation of the August Wilson screenplay by the same name. It's directed by George C. Floyd. Denzel Washington is one of the main producers of it, and they have a phenomenal cast as well. So the cast members include people like Coleman Domingo, Glenn Turman. Of course, remember he was at one point married to Aretha Franklin. I remember him from being on A Different World, so it was good to see him again. Chadwick Boseman, of course, rest in peace. And Viola Davis. I'm skipping a few people, but overall, I enjoyed this project. I think sometimes, and I've said this before when it comes to movies, sometimes when you see a movie, you know that you're watching a movie and it's like, all right, and sometimes you may not connect with it and you're like, all right, what time is this thing over with? Okay, how much more longer we got? And then there's sometimes you watch and you see a movie and you feel like you're there. You feel like you're in the room, or you might even be in one of the chairs on the side sitting somewhere. And I think that's where the cast shine. They were able to be convincing and really able to pretty much, you know, turn and transform into the characters that they were supposed to portray and really bring out something that, at least for me, was engaging. And so with Viola Davis, where she shined is, of course, Viola can play anybody at this point. Like, every role she gets, you know, she's going to be convincing. She really dives into the role, and you don't feel like it's just Viola Davis pretending to be somebody. You feel like she really turns into that person. So everything from the mannerisms to the posture, the accents, the how the stares and the looks and the glares, and just how she'd hold her hand, or how she'd hold the mic, or how she'd tilt her head, like all of that, she's just so well studied. And so she nailed the role, nailed it. I'm sure there's probably a bunch of award show season buzz around her portrayal. And then of course when you get to Chadwick Boseman, again, rest in peace, same thing. Every role he's had in that catalog of his, he's just always nailed each and every role. Like, that's one way to go out. I'll give him that. You know, he has such a vast catalog, or at least a vast resume of really, really acclaimed roles and portrayals of different people. And he nailed it every single time. And I think with the character he played, the character had such an emotional story and an emotional experience, and Chad was able to somehow bring that out. And I felt that I was not sitting there watching Chad. I felt like I was really watching the character Levy. I didn't feel like every 5 minutes, oh man, Chad's not even with us anymore. So for that hour and 30 minutes, I really felt that I was in the room with that character, and I could understand exactly what was happening in that character's mindset. By the way, I am giving spoilers during the second half of the video, but I will let you know when I give them, so don't worry, you don't have to panic and everything yet. And so I think the casting just on point. And I think with August Wilson's work, you know, when it comes to the scripts, because I saw some commentary from some people saying, well, I thought this was kind of boring, or there was too many scenes with just the men talking in the room, or we want to see more of Ma Rainey, so on and so forth. But I think the gift that August Wilson had before he passed, God rest his soul too, was that, you know, there's messaging and things to be interpreted in all of his scripts. Everything has a plot, and it's symbolic of something bigger, or a larger conversation. And so as I watched, you know, because this was about an hour and 30 minutes, as I watched, you know, I pretty much was watching to try to pull out and interpret, you know, what messages were within the script. I'll get to some of that towards the end. And so I actually enjoyed all of it. I have not had a chance to actually see the production of this, but I did get to read the screenplay years ago. And so it's kind of cool to try to piece together what I remember and try to correlate it with the movie. But hopefully, I don't know, I'll have to go back and see, you know, some of the other stage productions of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom that are available, if there's any out there. But there's so many gems in it. One of the pieces I really enjoyed as well was just even the music. You know, there were only a few selections that were presented in the film as far as the music, but you know, it gave me an appreciation for the work that people had to do when it came to recording their music, you know, in the past. You know, fortunately today, or luckily today, you don't have to put in the same amount of effort when it comes to recording, because, you know, now with programming and everything, you don't have to record songs in one take. But this is an era where, you know, everything was done in one take. You had the live band in the session, and so it just shows you the stamina, especially that vocalists had to have during that time period. Because imagine, you know, you have to do multiple takes. It's not like you can mess up the song and start over from where you left off. No, we got to start everything over. So the trumpet player, they got to go back and start over, you know, and depending on what kind of trumpet they're playing, you play the trumpet for a few hours and lips start hurting because that trumpet starts to cut into your lip depending on how you play or how you use the trumpet. And, you know, your vocals can get tired after a while if you keep going over and over and over. And it depends on what the elements are in the room. You know, if the room is too cold or there's too much dry air, then your throat dries out and you might not be able to do certain things. And so just looking at how much work went into the recording process, I'm not going to spoil it, but there is a scene that's very interesting that kind of just shows the ups and downs of recording a live session. And people having to depend on people and so on and so forth. And so, you know, I was like, wow, what a time. Another piece that's interesting, I would really like to see possibly another project that's centered on Ma Rainey and pretty much, you know, a full out like biopic. You know, she was featured in the Bessie Smith movie as well. If you remember, that was like spring, summer 2015. Queen Latifah and Monique were in it as well. And Monique had played Bessie Smith. And so it was interesting to see Monique's portrayal versus Viola's portrayal. But I would like to see a full portrayal of her life because it seems like she had a lot going on. You know, she had a very, very interesting life. Sadly, she died at 53. But, you know, she had a lot going on. But it's just interesting. I would love to see a full out production or a full out play or a full out movie about her life because it seems that there was so much she was able to do. But at the same time, you know, you're a black woman in the music business in the 1920s and 30s during a time period where, of course, and the movie does a great job of portraying that as well, it's almost like a power struggle between people who really just want to exploit the sound and get their check versus people who are passionate about what it is that they're doing. And so that would be interesting. And I also have to give kudos to somebody like a Denzel Washington. I just think he's a very upstanding person. The work with Fences was phenomenal. I think he got snubbed by a few of the award shows in regards to Fences, but I just think overall, and I'm saying this because I've met him twice. Actually, I'll give a quick story, but the kids I work with got a chance to meet him one time, and I was under the impression, okay, this is going to be some A-list celebrity that's going to come in there. We're going to have all of 5 minutes. It's going to be a photo op, take the picture. All right, we got to go. Mr. Washington has to leave now. This man hung with us for almost 2 hours, and at the same time, what I thought was going to happen was, okay, I'd have my kids and they, you know, we have the little note card and ask a question, you know, when did you want to become a movie star? And he flipped the script and he was like, no, we're not asking me any questions. I'm going to ask you guys all the questions. And he literally had each kid come up and he had a full conversation with them for like 2 or 3 minutes. You know, what do you want to do when you grow up? What are you doing to get there? Awesome. I remember there was this one kid, the kid was like, I want to be a preacher. Oh, he was like, really? Okay. Do you believe in prayer? Okay, well, you want to pray for us? And so the kid prayed and did this like phenomenal prayer. I'm like, he was super, super dope. And my poor coworker was so pissed because she couldn't go. And he was nice enough to actually, you know, take my phone, record a video message to her and say, hey, sorry. Or not my phone. It was when my kids did it on their phone. You know, hey, sorry I missed you weren't able to come, but, you know, we missed you here, but, you know, just definitely support you and what you're doing in the community, so on and so forth. And so ever since that, I'm like, Denzel is one dope person. So, you know, kudos to him. What I want to do is I want to go a little bit deeper and I want to just interpret or at least how I saw the ending scene. All right. So this is where the spoiler comes in. So I'm giving you guys about 5 seconds to come and turn the video off because I know some of you guys play YouTube videos and you're cooking at the same time and you are not close enough to change it. So we're going to do the countdown, okay? In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's switch it up. Okay, I had to change. Since we're talking theater and film, I wanted to be dramatic and participate. So this is the Act 2 attire. All I did was put a coat on. But, okay, so getting back to the portion that I want to talk about as we get a little deeper, I want to spend some time on Chadwick Boseman's character, Levee. And so, again, when we talked about August Wilson and the scripts that he had for his plays, because remember, this specific screenplay was a part of a series of 10 plays. It was called the Pittsburgh Cycle. I think some people also called it the Century Cycle. But each play was pretty much telling the story of the experience of black Americans starting in the early 1900s, working their way into later during the 20th century. And so all of these stories have a bunch of different narratives and experiences about oppression and hardships. I think one of my favorites out of all of them was the piano lesson. That's the one about the sharecropper. And it was like the conversation about getting the land and the instruments that he was trying to sell and not sell and so on and so forth. That's a really, really good one too. I think that was made into a movie as well back in the 90s, I think. But all of August Wilson's plays, there was always a message that was hidden. So when we dig deeper into the character Levee, for me, the character Levee was somebody who was scarred. And when I say scarred, it's really in relation to the fact that the experience of many black Americans during that time period, which is the 1920s, it was met with a lot of elements of racism and violence and so on and so forth. And there was never an element of empathy for anybody who fell victim to what was happening. It was the norm. It was expected. People had built their lives around how to live safely and maneuver safely in a society that didn't want them. And when you get into his experience, when he starts talking about, you know, there's that monologue that Chadwick he killed that delivery of that. But the monologue he gives about the 9 white men who pretty much break into the house and literally try to rape his mother in front of him, and he tries to stop them, and then they slash his chest open with the knife. And the father wasn't around at the time, and so they tried to take him to the doctor. The doctor wasn't trying to see him because the doctor was going on vacation, so they had to take him to the midwife instead. And then the father finally finds out about what happens, and the father goes and, I think the father kills 4 of them, but then they end up killing the father and lynching him and then burning him. And so that's his experience. And at the same time, he's expected to just maneuver through society like everything is all good. Because again, this was the norm of that era. And so I think what happened is when he would clash with the band represented in his mind the old guard. The band represented a mindset where it's, well, let's just play the role and keep it safe and leave things the way they are. We don't want to do too much. And so when you look at just how the band was set up, you had members, who were content with the rules that were set. They didn't want to change any of the arrangements. They just want to do what Ma Rainey and the record label said do, and we good to go. The character Levy was like, no, I want to do more. And I think that's because his escapism from the hardship and the scars was music. His escapism was playing that trumpet and doing, making that trumpet sing. Doing all kind of things. That was the way to fill that void of emptiness that he would have had from such a traumatic childhood. Because again, this is before therapy. Okay? This is before having conversations. This is that era where men were expected to just be brutes. Can't be emotional. You go out and you do your work and so on and so forth. Wife comes home and she takes care of the home. There's not going to be a whole lot of conversations about how do you feel internally. How can we deal and process everything that's happening in your past? That wasn't happening. So I feel personally that his escapism was the music, and that's why he was so passionate about the arrangements and wanting to have his own band and starting his own thing, because he had created a world for himself that that's the world that he envisioned, and he wanted to get to, that next layer or that next space that would make him feel, internally content. Again, the band represented the old guard, and he was somebody who was just against the status quo. He wasn't pressed to try to do what Ma Rainey said, because again, he was like, I'm not gonna need you anyway. I've already written these songs. I'm gonna give them to the exec. I'm gonna start my own band, and I can do even more. He really enjoyed that whole element of spotlight. In the beginning of the movie, remember there was a scene where he's looking at the other lady, I can't think of her name, but he comes out further on the stage, breaking protocol so he could be seen, and that she can see him while he's playing and everything, so on and so forth. So that whole element of just, no rules attached. Because again, when you've had such an experience where you've watched your mother get raped, you've been slashed with a nice little, halfway killed, your father's been murdered and so on and so forth, what are rules? I done already been stabbed. What, y'all gonna fire me? Ooh, that's kind of like the vibe that I got from him. And so, again, the idea of just going against the grain, he already had a vision for what was going to happen in his life. Unfortunately, everything comes crashing down in a matter of minutes. And so, when you get to the portion after that recording session, which was, again, an interesting session, going back, I do want to dig deeper into the other characters as well. Like, I think with August Wilson, all of the characters, again, had internal demons that they had to fight. And I think those demons were all rooted, again, in living in a society that is, one, oppressive, and two, you're on the receiving end of racism from a structural standpoint. And so even the kid that stuttered, somebody from the outside looking in would be like, okay, we don't get it. Just have somebody else do the line, please. Pretty much, because the record execs were like, just get somebody else to do it. The other members of the band, get somebody else to do it. But Ma Rainey is like, no, absolutely not. And I think that goes back to, again, a black young man in the 1920s with a stutter. Well, society's already looking at you like you're not intelligent, you can't do anything. And I think the purpose of that scene, the purpose of why that was written, was to say, okay, you're only going to see yourself the way you want to see yourself. If you let society tell you who you are, then you're going to start identifying yourself that way. So I think by her pretty much saying, no, we're going to do it until you get it right, because I know that you can do this. You've done it before. We're not going to let all of these people from the outside tell you what you can't do. We're going to sit here till we get it right. So I think that's what that scene was symbolic of. And then again, even with Ma Rainey, how she dealt with the record exec. She wasn't here for the BS. She recognized that in that music business, which again, there's a conversation about race, and then the fact that this is a black woman, in an industry run by white men during that time period, she recognized that she was valued. She was valuable. She recognized that without her, there's no show. She's the talent. She's what everybody wants. And so, yes, you may think you have power at the moment, record execs, but without me, you have nothing. And you've made all this money off black talent, but you're not gonna do that for me. Like, this is gonna be on my terms. Everything I want, we're gonna do it, or I can go home. And so I think that's why you kept seeing the different antics that she had. Well, I don't have my Coca-Cola. Well, we ain't doing nothing. We're gonna take a break. We're gonna stop for another hour. I'll get here when I get here. Somebody done hit my car. Well, we're gonna be out here until I get a new car. And so every character just had, you know, I think every character's story is symbolic of just an experience and an interpretation of how people had to process the world that they were living in. And so getting back to the character Levee, one of the things you saw was when they make fun of the whole code switching thing, where, you know, Levee done talked all this trash. I ain't no punk. I ain't this. I ain't that. And then as soon as the record exec came in, he switched it up. Oh, yes, sir. Well, you know, I'm excited about so-and-so. And all of the other members of the band are kind of frying him up like, oh, I thought you said you was this, that, and the third. And I think, again, he in his mind had believed that, okay, I've figured out a system that works, that I can master, where all I have to do is play their little game. I can play their little game, but I have all the talent and so on and so forth, and it will get me into the doors. And I think that he had created his own world where he believed that that was going to work. You know what I mean? He already had the songs that he created, and he was ready to go ahead and start recording as soon as, you know, things would align. So that's why he wasn't pressed about Ma Rainey, because he knew that deep down, you know, he was good to go. And that's why he went and he bought the shoes for $11. And back in 1927, $11 was the equivalent of $163 in 2020. And so, you know, he knew that he was already getting into a new world. You know, he was going to be participating in something that what the old guard would deem, you know, just unattainable. But he saw it for himself. And so that's why he carried himself in the manner he did, because he was already living in a world that he had created for himself, but the reality hadn't hit in yet. You know, it hadn't come into fruition. When he gets fired, his whole world changes in a matter of minutes, and everything that he once thought is compromised, because he initially thought he had the security blanket with the record exec. They had already made the arrangement. He's written these songs. The record exec is going to let him record the songs with his own band. And of course, he's excited about his sound because he feels that what he's doing is better than everything else that's out. He wants to do what they're doing up north, what the New York folks are doing over in Harlem. And of course, he has all these fresh ideas. And again, Ma Rainey and that band represent the old guard, the old way of doing things, the things that would to him come off as routine and familiar, something he's trying to escape from, because he's never known anything routine and familiar aside from chaos and depression and murder and rape and pillaging. And so he wants something different. And so again, he is under the impression that he has a security blanket, but when he finds out that the record exec is like, no, actually, we're actually pretty good. We don't need you. We'll take your music. You know, I'll buy each song for $5, and that's the equivalent of about $74.35 after, you know, you do the adjustments for inflation. Yes, that's some money, and I think they bought a handful of songs, but at the same time, when you're talking music business, if they're only just buying that song and nothing else, there's no conversation about royalties or publishing or anything like that, and you can't tour off the songs because you're not recording them, he recognizes that his long-term plan has now fallen apart. And everything that he once worked for, because his initial goal was, okay, I want to have my own stuff. And that record exec represented access to all of that. And so even understanding that the world that he created for himself when it came to code switching and thinking he had mastered a system where, okay, I can play their game and then it's going to get me into those doors. Now everything that he has believed in has just crashed in front of him all in a matter of minutes. You know, the whole code switching thing doesn't matter. It is what it is. The record exec has changed the story 15 different times about why they don't want to work with him. So this man has just watched his whole world fall apart. And that pretty much reiterates the fact that now there's no escapism from the world that he was trying to get away from, because now he's going right back to it. Again, he created this space where he thought he was going to a certain space. And that's why he bought the shoes. That's why he's talking trash to the whole band. That's why even as Ma Rainey said, you got to play it this way, he still played whatever he wanted to play. He knew that he was pretty much one step from walking into this world that he was going to create for himself based on the talents that he had, which were, you know, these talents with the trumpets and the instruments, which again was his escapism from the harsh reality of his past. And so, you know, now he has to go back in that room with the band that he just cussed out earlier. You know, he already told all of them that they were this, that, and the third. And again, when we keep saying that conversation of the old guard, all the band members are happy with their lives. They're happy just doing these nice little cute arrangements so they can go on tour, get their little check, go home. They're all good to go. That's not enough for Levee. Levee wants more, because again, in order to escape all of that hardship from the past, he has to build a world that is so extremely perfect, so extremely wealthy, so extremely lush with, you know, everything that he would so desire to have. Then he can't go back to what it is that they have, because what they have isn't what he wants. He hasn't, you know, he hasn't built a world that aligns with what it is that they value. And so when it gets into that scene where Toledo steps on his shoe, I think that, because, of course, you know, Toledo steps on the shoe. He has this whole confrontation. Why you step on my shoe? And Toledo's like, I said, excuse me, it is what it is. What you want me to do about it? You know, what you want me to do? And so, of course, he goes and he stabs and kills Toledo. I think that is symbolic of just his entire world collapsing, everything. And the anger that he had really wasn't just about the shoe. It really had nothing to do with that, in my opinion. It was more so, one, again, everything he once thought just a few moments earlier had came crashing down. So he had all this built-up anger already for the record executive. That was already kind of sitting there. And then, again, now he also has been given this conversation of, you know, with the record exec, your music is good, but we don't want you. So what you have built out of the oppression that you've had to live is wonderful, but you're not valuable enough to present it. You're not worthy enough to be the face of it. You're not worthy enough to, you know, go any further. So we're going to take away from you the agency and everything you had that, you know, put you in a space where you could create something that helped to fill voids that were empty based on the hurt that you had in the past. We're going to take all that, and we're only going to give you $5 for it. So here you go. And so now he's back in this room with the old guard and all the people he does not want to be. Somebody like Toledo, I think the reason Toledo gets killed is Toledo represents who he's running from. Toledo represents how Levee would see himself if Levee settled and didn't go and push further with anything else. And again, if you remember in the beginning of the movie, Levee was making fun of Toledo's shoes because, you know, you got them old raggedy whatever them things are, and so now it's like you done stepped on my $163 shoes circa 2020 with them old raggedy boots on, and you're not even going to apologize. Like, I'm not going to be disrespected by anybody, especially not you. And so again, it's kind of like, you know, he sees what he doesn't want to be in Toledo. And I think with just that whole world crashing down and just everything, he's just in this place where it's just, he's just impulsive. He's reactionary, because you see that happen over and over again in the movie. Every time he's compromised, he just kind of blows up and spazzes out, almost with the maturity of a child, which again will go back to when the situation with the mother happened, being raped, him being a kid when it happened. It's like you see that same element of an emotional response come out, and then boom, he kills Toledo. And so, I mean, there's so many layers in this. That's just how I interpreted it. I'm not saying that's how it was intended to be written, but that's what I got out of it. But, you know, the movie just goes into so many different directions as far as just what was happening during that era. Because even again, how it closes, you see this all-white band, you know, performing Levee's songs, and it's the most dry rendition, no energy. It's almost kind of like, it's almost like the era of Little Richard and Pat Boone in like 1957 with like Tutti Frutti and some of the other songs as well. But it's kind of like, again, it just kind of shows what was happening in America. So back then, it was like, okay, we would just rather just take the song and have somebody else record it. We're not even going to give you the opportunity to be the face of it. Not at all. You know, so we'll buy this from you. No royalties, no publishing, none of that. You're not going to get rich off it. We will, but, you know, here's a little quick check. And then you fast forward to the 1950s, and they're still doing that. But now it's like, even after black artists record a song and put it out, somebody white can still go and re-record it, and then it gets pushed because radio's going to play it, because, you know, these aren't considered race records, so these records are safe enough for the pop stations and so on and so forth. And so, you know, you saw a lot of white artists during that time period outsell black artists who literally recorded the same song during that same time period or a few years earlier. You know, everybody has a conversation about Elvis as well, or even just the fact that somebody like a Jerry Lee Lewis would blow up later down the line, and people are like, you got your entire mojo from what black people were doing during the Chitlin circuit. So okay, but, you know, overall, very, very interesting film. I feel like there's so many layers to unpeel. It just depends on how you see the world. I'm somebody who's super, super over analytical about everything. So I know some of y'all are watching like, how did you get all of that? That is not what that is not what they intended, but that's what I got. So overall, I enjoyed the movie. Yeah, God, Chad Boseman, that hurts my heart that he's not with us anymore. So sad. But I mean, he went out with a bang. Like, that's a good way to go out, because I think he just, and I'm not saying like him passing, but as far as what he was able to contribute before his time came, I mean, just the effort and the quality and the talent. He definitely had a career ahead of him. I mean, he already had a booming career, but I mean, I just wonder what could have been. I mean, he had already done everything, but still, just, he was only, what, 43, 44? Like, there was so much more he had in store for him. But, you know, I think, again, everybody has their time. But overall, I think the movie was really good. I enjoyed it. It depends on just what you're into. But I think if you watch and try to build your own interpretation of what's happening with the mindset of the characters, I think you'll have a different experience with the film as well. Anyway, I'm out. Share your 2 cents. Subscribe.